We are in conversation with Rakesh Sharma, Executive Director of Bajaj Auto. Mr. Sharma, thanks for speaking to us. I think I want to start off straight with what is a bit of good news. We are seeing a recovery in the market all round. It's been a V-shaped recovery. Is this something you expected, the way the market has bounced back? And more importantly, do you expect it to sustain? Because clearly now, everyone's in a recovery. In the sense that it's running into the festive season. So obviously a bit of buoyancy there. But the worry is if it will sustain after that.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon. So you're absolutely right. The the pace of the recovery did surprise us. I think it surprised everyone in the industry. When it first occurred in June, it came rushing back. And at that time, we felt it even more severely because, the supply chain had to really scramble. And July was a bit of a slowdown because that's the month we realized that the recovery is almost directly correlated to the lockdown situation. So while we were in the lockdown, we were thinking there are three dimensions to this. One is, there has been economic impairment. Second is there has been psychological changes in consumer behavior in terms of becoming more conservative. And the third one was the physicality of the lockdowns. But when the recovery began in June and July, it became apparent to us that the economic impairment and the psychological impact were actually minimalized. And the only thing which mattered for the recovery for the rebound to go on and on was the easing of the lockdown. But at the same time, we were, of course, facing a lot of supply chain pressures, transport system pressures. These things started to come into some kind of an equilibrium in August. And August, that way, I would say, was a very stable month where we reached about 90% in motorcycles. We reached in India about 90% levels of, let's say, a similar period in the previous year. Come September, and particularly towards the second half of September, and I may be splitting hairs because, everyone is so much after this whole COVID situation, everyone is so keen to, understand what's going on. I may be splitting hairs, but nevertheless, I think second half of September has brought in some kind of a moderation and caution into our viewpoint. I certainly feel that the festive season, which is now on us for the last 2 days and on for the next 30, should be good. And we have prepared for that in terms of the stock, etc. Because, in India, there is still an arrival of a new vehicle in a household is something to be celebrated. And there has been so much of dark news and bad times. We are finding that definitely there is people would want to celebrate in some manner or the other. The rural incomes, particularly the areas around the mandi towns, have seen a better liquidity and flow of money because of the even progression of monsoons. And to some extent, in urban areas, we are definitely seeing some talk about choosing two-wheelers because it's a safer option. So when we put all the three things together, I think we can expect a normal festive season if it should be equal to last year. Now, going forward, I'm a bit more sanguine about how the industry is going to unfold, because remember that last year was actually a decline year because of various things which had happened. You know it better than us, the costs which had gone up. And also, as you know, the BS6 costs have actually been passed on to the customer, and we'll be seeing the full flood. And there is underlying economic contraction, right? And I think all these things are definitely going to have their shadow will fall on the industry post the season. So I would say that if the season goes off at a marginal growth or normal growth post-season, we might just see a decline unless the government steps in and, does something very, very directly to provoke demand.
So, I just want to take that thing when the government steps in. I think, Bajaj has been quite vocal about things like overregulation. Do you think also there's been talk about, some GST benefits or taxation benefits? What do you think the government should do? You say, if the government steps in, what would you expect, and what do you think are the right things to do to kind of stimulate growth?
Well, of course, we being in a company and being in industry, I must preface my remarks by saying that we don't understand the big picture. And of course, we all read the same people in the Economist and the economic pages. And we know that there is a severe resource crunch, and the resources are being directed towards the more vulnerable parts of the society. And that's a good short-term action to be taken. There are certain industry-specific things, and there are certain overall. I would say we have hastened towards regulations which appear to be an overkill. I mean, we can do many things for the industry, which are very, very industry-specific. We don't see, for example, ABS in 150cc. Even some of the developed nations don't have it. And with our kind of speeds, whether we should be, if you reduce this discussion to a very, top level discussion and say human lives are more important than corporate profits, what can one say? But is it, if you go beyond that, does a 150cc ABS on a 150cc bike, which is essentially a commuter bike which is running at 40 to 60 kilometers per hour speed, does it need an ABS, and does that have to drive up costs, or making mandatory insurance of third-party insurance of 5 years? These kind of things have been adding little, and it's the proverbial, one day you reach the last straw on the camel's back, and they keep adding. We are wanting to encourage exports, but suddenly, in a sweep, 2% is gone. No, 2% may look very small, but the point is that companies like us, we labor for, we have programs to shave off 1%, and we are fighting the Chinese in many markets. And I fully subscribe to this viewpoint that we don't need any direct subsidy, but there is a method of doing these things, the withdrawal and all. And there has been a system, and if you see over the last 10 years, the subsidies have reduced from some levels of 12 to 15% to 2% over a period of time. Right. And despite that, the auto industry exports has done very well. And then when you come to things like the GST, now one doesn't know what the resources are, etc. However, at least two-wheelers, I can say, is more an essential. It's not a toy. It's a tool for the people. Today, with the kind of public transport which we have, and people wanting independence and mobility, it's a very essential product. And our penetration of two-wheelers in the industry is still very, very low compared to, Southeast Asia with similar GDP per capita. And if we reduce the GST, it will increase the demand. We just have to have faith in the Indian consumption story, in the Indian demographic story. We are young people. These are very natural markets for a motorcycle. If we have the confidence that if we reduce GST from 28 to 18, the consumer will respond, because we are in the demographic sweet spot. And the rise in volumes, and already the rise in prices because of BS6, etc. Both these things will mitigate the loss of 28% to 18%. And some kind of maths can be done, and there will still be a risk. After all, at a corporate level, don't we do this? There are many times we have to enter a new market. We've got, a formidable competitor. We say, okay, for 2 years, we are not going to make any money. We're going to invest, and we're going to, build this market. I think this card is wide open, and it will have two benefits. One will, of course, the domestic side, the consumption will go up. But I will tell you one thing which we are again not looking at seriously enough, because perhaps we don't possess the confidence as a nation to undertake this. I think as a nation, we can be a really formidable power in the motorcycling world. Uh, I mean, globally, we can be a formidable power. And one of the things which will enable us to do that is having large scale over here. So if you build up domestic scale, the overseas business will sit on the strong shoulders of domestic business. And we are in a very good position in the Indian industry to be truly world leaders in an industry of significant size. And so that, I think, is another consequential benefit which will occur if we have a large domestic industry. I mean, the benefits flow to component manufacturers, you get scale, quality, better prices, so many things.
So no, that's very interesting, Rakesh. So just talking about scale, I want to switch to the. I mean, we do have scale at a certain level. We are in a way the largest two-wheeler market, but let's look at EVs for example. We are really. I think we've kind of lost the race already in many sense. You've launched the the Chetak EV. It's not got off to a great start. Clearly, volumes are small. Obviously, what it tells you also is there's, EVs are still quite expensive. I mean, to be honest, EVs, even at a two-wheel level, are for the more affluent people. It's quite clear that way. I mean, this whole EV race, this talk about EVs, sense one gets also is that, OEMs get into it sometimes to just pay lip service, just to be there, knowing full well that the volumes are just not going to be there for a while. Now, even for two-wheelers, because if you see the delta in cost between an ICE and an EV, forget about the infrastructure and all that. I mean, there are huge challenges. I mean, what is your way forward? What you've learned right now with the Chetak? Is it more localization? Because from what I understand, I think you still import a fair bit of the componentry. Is it infrastructure, or is it finally just that absolute cost? Because a two-wheeler guy, that's all he cares about is that last paisa in terms of running costs. So, I mean, we've talked about EVs. Everyone's trying to get to, or the only one who doesn't want it is the consumer. I mean, everyone else wants it. You see it in presentations, you see it at fora, you see it at exhibitions. In fact, the joke is that sometimes there are more EVs in exhibitions than there are on the road. So just wanted to get your sense. Is this growing? Is this a growing market? I mean, do you think there is definite potential? I'm talking about proper two-wheeler EVs, not these sub 1 kilowatt kind of the very small powered ones, which really aren't really practical.
Yeah. So you see, there is a lot of ambiguity around this subject, and if I had to place my finger on one point only, you have named it already, and that point is cost. Till the time we don't make them cost effective, no consumer is going to buy it to save the world. Unfortunately, we can say whatever we want in the drawing rooms and the living room discussions.
You're not saving their pocket more than the world.
Exactly. Nobody, maybe somebody in the west coast of the US, but largely people are not spending the extra bucks to save the world. That's the bitter truth. So everything is dependent on cost, and cost is driven almost entirely by the battery and by the cells and the cost.
Correct.
However,
Correct.
Having said that, there is definitely in the last couple of years indications that the cost, there is a probability that the cost might come down, significantly to make the battery cost, so which will make the EV almost at par with IC. When that happens, it will be, we will see perhaps a sudden closure or a sudden folding in of the IC engines. Now, so it's a category 5 storm in the Pacific somewhere. It is going to make a landfall, but where and when exactly it's going to make a landfall, we don't know. So I would say the OEs, all the OEs, and I can speak for us definitively, we are not giving it lip service. We are saying that today we must be in the EV business because we must get onto the learning curve, because this is a new business and we don't want a Kodak moment 3 years down the line when suddenly the battery costs have come down and things have changed into EV, and we are left stuck with ICE. So we
Be
definitely
prepared
want
with
to
the
get
tech and the experience.
exactly the tech, the vendors, the consumer behavior, and we believe that we will still win on the basis of product performance, styling, design, delighting the customer, solving customer problems. But we want to get onto the learning curve. And fortunately, we are a company which can spend some money. Today, we are making a loss, but we are saying, okay, we are keeping aside this money. It is like we paying the tuition fees for traveling up the learning curve. So we will do that. And that is the basis on which we have, now, not to make a PR statement, but genuinely for us to be up, going up on the learning curve. And if either via a subsidy, government support, or battery costs coming down, it starts to make business sense. We will accelerate. And that's where we are. That's why we. So if you take the objective with which we have entered, that's why we made a limited entry, which also unfortunately got hampered because of the COVID situation and the supply chain. Actually, from Wuhan, we were dependent on Wuhan, and that got disrupted, and we had to stop the bookings. We've still not reopened the bookings. We got so many bookings that we feel that we don't want to take anymore. We first want to satisfy these customers in Pune and Bangalore, and only then open up. So our plan is, we first want to get to a stability, make sure that the supply chain wheel is ticking, and then open up the bookings in Pune and Bangalore, and then later on expand to a few more cities, wait and watch, be in position, learn, understand, and see how it goes.
Yeah, a quick one. But what about on the three-wheeler side for commercial application, and even for something like the Qute, an electric quadricycle, there seems to be a much more a proper business case for it, because I think the economics actually seem to work.
No, actually it's the same issue. At least in the personal side, there is an emotional content, or there's an emotional reason for which somebody can pick up the vehicle. But if you ruthlessly analyze the commercials of the three-wheeler, the situation is even more difficult. And particularly when you compare a CNG-based three-wheeler, and we've got very good, and that's one good thing that the government is doing, is increasing the CNG availability. So when you compare a CNG-based three-wheeler with an electric three-wheeler, proper three-wheeler, I'm not talking of these ramshackle ones imported from China based on lead acid, then the business case is very weak. But again, following the same philosophy, even in the electric for three-wheeler or quadricycle, our approach is that we put out a limited, amount of number of products over there, and
Start the learning curve with that.
Yeah.
And Rakesh, just coming back to the domestic market, I just want to understand on the whole supply chain issue. Are there still challenges? What one hears is that the tier 2, tier 3, maybe even tier 4 suppliers, there are a lot of challenges with them, which really disrupts the supply chain. And this also leads me to the fact, has this let's say, challenges with supply also cleaned up inventory issues? There's no more, let's say, huge buildup of inventories. That way discounts are better controlled. So in a way, the pipeline is slightly more streamlined and tighter as a result. But is the supply chain still an issue? Because we understand that still is. I mean, it's not completely normal, even though demand is coming back.
Yeah. So the supply chain is able to now meet the requirements, the demand which is coming in. However, having said that, it is still very fragile, because there are every day there are cases of COVID. COVID is increasing, and small vendors, tier 2, tier 3 vendors, on whom tier 1 is dependent and on whom we are dependent, we will suddenly have supply outages because there are COVID cases have flared up, which has led to absenteeism, which has led to interruptions in production. And then we have to scramble, and we have to say, oops, if there is a problem in this vendor, can we now swiftly shift production to some other vendor and compensate? So there is a whole lot of scurrying around, and so a lot of scrambling around, and somehow trying to make all the pieces fall together. But theoretically, yes, supply is now equal to demand, but there is a lot of scrambling going on.
Sorted. Right. Right. So it's still a little, there are disruptions, but I think you can manage the, it's not hampering really the production finally.
Yeah. I mean, it's taking a toll, I must say. It is a lot of management work, and there is a lot of, I would say, gallant effort being put by the supply chain boys, because it has, impact on how to schedule production, and then how to schedule the dispatches, organizing transport. And then to just answer you asked another a question on inventories. Actually, the BS4, BS6 changeover had cleaned up a lot of the inventory itself. So that reduction had started to happen at that time. I think the industry has built up stocks because everyone is seeing this 45-day window as a chance to, get some top line moving. And everyone is seeing that post this window, the situation is very ambiguous. So everyone wants to make sure that we are not left stranded for inventory reasons during this 45 days. And see, the other issue is that you might just suddenly have a flare-up of COVID, and you may not be able to transport it, or you may have a supply chain issue bang in the middle of the season.
Exactly.
So people have tried to err on the side of abundance. Yeah, they want to err on the side of abundance and then take corrections later.
Right. Great, Rakesh. Just switching to future products. I know you don't talk too much about them, but just to get a sense, especially I think there's been a lot of interest from our readers, just on the whole Triumph Bajaj Association and the venture. What's the timeline? When can we see some products coming out from that?
See, as you say, it's very difficult for me to be specific on this because it's not just that I have to be also conscious of we have a partner over here, and we have to both work together in what we have to say. So that's an additional thing, but which one needs to be sensitive about. But I can tell you there is hectic work going on between the two R&Ds. We have lots of meetings taking place, and we have jointly done research in India with the kind of options we have had in mind, and we've got some very, very good feedback that has been rolled in. We're looking at the architecture of the whole portfolio, and so there is a lot of work going on, and I think it is shaping up pretty well. It got interrupted for 6 months because of COVID, both on the Triumph side and our side, and we're trying to pick it up now. So it has delayed us a little bit. It is still some time away, but I would say we've got back on track. And most importantly, what it's looking like is that we are going to be able to present a range to the Indian customer, which is going to be a fantastic combination of heritage, classic, and yet modern. I think people will be delighted at good prices.
Right. Okay, that's something to look forward to. And also, anything to say on the products on the 490 KTM platform, or is that how's that progressing?
Well, then I would say again, let's wait for things to come out. So it's difficult to say this way yes or no about new products without.
I won't press you. Fine, no problem. I won't press you on that. But
what we are very encouraged about is the way the Adventure is being received. The Adventure 390 in KTM, the way it's being received in India. It's very, very encouraging.
Right. And do you feel that, adventure bikes and just basically this whole unlocking thing, you think there could be, let's say, a spurt or a trend towards people wanting these kind of products more and more?
Oh, I think even with or without COVID, we were seeing that there is definitely this genuine ride-out culture, which is taking root, particularly in adventure. And I expect that we will, over a period of time, see this community really developing, because don't forget, it's a youthful country. And the whole thing is that for people like us to make it more accessible. So one of the things which we are really pushing is saying that, listen, graduate up to the 250, to the quarter liter class first. There are many countries in the world where the penetration of the 250cc is far higher than it is in India. And in the KTM 4, we are launching these KTM experiences, which are, professional rides, adventure rides, which are curated not just for pleasure, but for instruction and training by experts. And this whole trend has inspired us to also invest in pro biking academies, where we can actually start to, at a fundamental level, train people on how to ride adventure bikes, how to ride bikes on the track, etc. Because we are sensing that there is a requirement for all this. But it takes time to create these type of categories, and we are prepared for that.
Great, Rakesh, on these, let's say notes of optimism and hope, and, hoping that the market grows. Just like to say thanks so much for talking to us. Really been a pleasure. Wish you all the best. And clearly, I think, obviously tough times, but good to see that the recovery has, been quite rapid. And as you said right in the beginning of the interview, it's taken everyone by surprise. I think now one just hopes that the demand sustains and we get back to being as normal as we possibly can. Thanks so much for talking to us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure. And thank you very much for having me over.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.